Here we are, everybody. Eclipse week, eclipse weekend, eclipse season, eclipse September. Eclipses are the main theme and the main topic in a certain sense of our astrology. Of course, everything's held in larger contexts and people want to talk about all kinds of different transits and everything, but a lot of people are going to be talking about these eclipses, all right? It's a moment of acceleration where we become ourselves. And I think these eclipse charts, and in particular the one I'm going to look at this video, is this weekend, 7 November, Sunday, Lunar Eclipse in Pisces chart, is very much about who we are. Who are we becoming? We're nodes of beingness. You know, we're little containers, right? There's the material realm, there's the manifest of reality. Each being is a little node that includes the whole, or is a part of the whole. And I think that is not some spiritual theory. I mean, that's logically true. Anybody would tell you, you are part of a whole. I'm breathing air that comes from outside of me. I need that air to rejuvenate the battery in the engine of my heart and the beating of the heart that runs everything, the electricity. Everything you eat is from other people. Everything we do is from this collective, interconnected oneness that is the Earth ecosystem. And then yes, we can now abstract or extrapolate into more spiritual philosophy and theory, but there is the idea of the total oneness of the kind of vibrations of God, that we are just a node of expression of. Some of these spiritual philosophies say God created us to experience itself or himself or herself or their self. And so we are really just like an expression of the divine, and that is our purpose. Getting way ahead of myself here, but these are the kind of contemplations that I would highly encourage during this eclipse week, 7 September 2025, Sunday, Lunar Eclipse in Pisces. Get ready for it. We're here. That's what this video is going to break down a little bit, some of the chart specifics to try to layer in a little bit more of astrological technique and just some exploration of theme and meaning to help guide our flow as we get into this eclipse weekend. So I'm astrologer S.J. Anderson, glad to be with you, and I look forward to breaking some of this down with you today. Yeah, eclipses, always a pivot or a inflection point often for our lives and the stories of our lives. Okay, just coming right out with the lead story. Jupiter in Cancer is the domicile lord of Pisces. It rules this eclipse and this lunar eclipse, and the moon in Pisces and Saturn back in Pisces, the primary planet, or one of the primary planets we would look to. And this is fundamental astrological technique. I mean, Astro 101, the domicile lord of a zodiac sign becomes the prime influencer of the flow or the outcome of what's happening in that zodiac sign. And of course, in the whole sign house system, that also includes a set of house topics. The point is, when things happen in Pisces, first primary question, what is Jupiter doing? How is Jupiter configured in our zodiac? And that's a huge part of it. I've talked plenty in the last couple of videos about Pisces and the dream realm and the surreality and time bending and all of that stuff. So I'm gonna do less of that here. Instead, I wanna say Jupiter in Cancer is the star of this eclipse season. It's the front and center lead actor of the show, because not only does it rule Pisces by domicile, it's hanging out in this first eclipse at 19 degrees. So it's aspecting quite closely by Trine, the eclipsed moon, which is at 15 degrees. And then the second eclipse, Jupiter sneaks into the 21 degrees part of Pisces, and it's aspecting them within 7 degrees by sextile the eclipsed sun. And so this Jupiter in Pisces, because of its free-flowing energetic, can give a lot and support us a lot during this eclipse season. And so it's worth just breaking it down thoroughly, because if I had to pick one planetary point, for sure it's Pisces and Saturn in Pisces, and then the nature of eclipses themselves. Yes, setting that aside, it's Jupiter as the kind of lead actor or the prime impetus for this moment in time and this moment in our reality. All right, so what does it mean? Well, one, the water element has taken over now. We know that Saturn and Jupiter are both in water signs, and I want to talk a little bit about this. Because Saturn and Jupiter were squaring each other from May 2024 until June 2025. They were in a square posture, and it was a mutable square. The chaos of that, the sort of out of control, chaotic nature of that was palpable. I know for me and for a lot of people I talked to that we were in this sort of chaos and a lot of energy and a lot of things happening, and not really easy to get a hold of certain areas of our charts at one level. These are the two great planets in the ancient system. We always map them. Centuries and millennia of technique have been built upon what is the relationship between Jupiter and Saturn. And so when this summer arrived and first Saturn entered Aries, the cardinal axis, on the 25th of May, and then 3 weeks later Jupiter entered Cancer, the cardinal axis, we then continued that tension, that pressurized kind of through tension, we are propelled into new initiation. And that was this summer for many, many people. Gosh, I've talked to even more people recently that this summer was a summer of great upheaval and change. And I put a lot of that onto the archetype of Cancer, a sign of initiation, which is to say cardinal signs are involved in our reality more than they've been for a long, long time with Jupiter and Saturn in the cardinal axis. But they were squaring each other. Saturn and Aries, letting go of maybe the structures that have been containing us and having to break those open to initiate new structures because we're required to kind of dig deep into our true passion and true self and initiate on that basis. Jupiter in Cancer, we initiate on the basis of truth and wisdom and justice and healing and loving those that we love and creating a home space and a nurturing space for ourselves and for those we love based on deep truth and wisdom. We initiate both of these signs around those themes. And so here we stand, Saturn now back into Pisces 2 days ago. And what do we have now? What do we have? We have double water with Jupiter and Saturn. We have a flowing trine by sign. The two planets in the water axis, Jupiter in Cancer ruling by domicile Saturn in Pisces. So it's doubling up this Jupiter and Cancer vibe. The initiations of the home worlds now are even more evoked because Saturn gives over to Jupiter by domicile, whereas when it was in Aries, it gave over to Jupiter by triplicity, but maybe it's not as strong. And it's certainly not a square posture, and it's certainly not double cardinal. Part of this moment then becomes finding our way home. So that's the nature then of this rulership schema. The other layer is that over Cancer, you have a domicile lord too. Jupiter's the exaltation lord, so very powerful in Cancer, very much of the Cancerian. We really don't need to come to the moon if we don't want to, because Jupiter has its own powers there in Cancer. But if we do choose to do that, and why not? I'm not suggesting you should ever not look at the moon when examining the zodiac sign Cancer, but the moon is the point being eclipsed in Pisces. And so there's what we call a mutual reception in astrology, where two planets rely on, need, and feed each other. That adds an even deeper layer to the synergy between the Piscean seeds of the unknown and the creative, emotive, and then the Cancerian initiative, protective depth of nurturance. And those two can then support and elide and, send energy to each other effectively. The song that's been on my mind just came into my head last night. And as soon as this song came into my head, I was like, that's it. That's the song of this eclipse. And it's a song called The Long and Winding Road. You've probably all heard it. Paul McCartney wrote it for the Beatles, and it's on the album Let It Be, I think. The classic lyric, the long and winding road that leads me to your door. The reason why I thought it was so perfect is because Pisces is a long and winding road. Saturn there is a long and winding road, right? 3 years. It'll be March 2023 until February 2026 that Saturn has taken us through a rebuild in our Pisces sectors. The eclipse journeys are a long and winding road. We've had one eclipse in Pisces. This is only the second of what will be 3 when it's all said and done. So we're in the middle of an eclipse-fated emergence around the Pisces sector. So that's a long journey, and it's probably a confusing journey and probably hard to articulate at times, especially right when you're in the middle of a journey. I mean, you don't know what's happening, and life has seasons, and right in the middle of something, it's hard to know what it will eventually be when things are over. I think as Saturn in Pisces is finishing out that process, we get closer and closer to the completion with that cycle every day that goes by. I broke that down in the last video, but it's late November, the direct station, and then just December, January, then only about less than 3 months to complete its time in Pisces. And that's hopefully when we'll get clarity on what we've built there with Saturn and with the power and potency of Saturn. But these are processes, and the nature of Pisces is a lack of clarity. So I love what's evoked in that lyric, the long and winding road, right? It implies that you don't really know how you got somewhere, and you've taken a circuitous route of twists and turns and detours and unexpected stops along the way. It's Odysseus coming back to Ithaca. And we'll have that picture next year. I'm going to do a whole video on the Odyssey and Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. There's a few things I want to talk about next year, but that's coming out next summer. And the timing of the release of that film is very uncannily interesting, with all of the outer planets triggering this peak of their application right as that film is going to be released. But that's a story of someone trying to get home and taking 10 years or more after a war and just being, battling and trying to figure out how to get back home. But that's the last sign of the zodiac, Pisces, right? So it evokes these journeys of trying to return home, and sometimes it takes a lot longer to return back to where we want to go or to get somewhere. It just takes what it takes, right? And that's life, it takes what it takes. And you know, this song, The Long and Winding Road That Leads Me to Your Door, the notion is that he's led back to a person, I think in this case, that he's gonna make a home with. A family member, effectively. And it took him a long time and a lot of struggles and journeying to be ready and to come to a settlement in this home, the door of the person that he's arriving to. And so that's the Jupiter in Cancer, right? That's the Jupiter in Cancer, where in this moment, in this weekend, in this whole season, Jupiter's been in Cancer since June. So we've probably been engaging with truth, wisdom, justice, revelation on these themes already all summer. It's just that now may be a time, because of Jupiter taking over rulership of the eclipse moon and Saturn, that some of that might be applicable more than it's ever been for you. It may be this weekend, this September, this eclipse season, when you're finally able to say, yes, this is who I am now, having been pushed into these new truths about myself, the cardinal square for the last few months. And now you're able to start applying or seeing how Jupiter in Cancer is really going to do well for you and really lead you home to your specific version of that. I think about epiphany, I think about realization, I think about the struggle actually for honesty and self-honesty. And this is where some of that Virgo-Pisces opposition becomes highly relevant. But Jupiter's truth and wisdom, and it can be revelation. That's not a permanent state. I mean, we're not just walking around with truth beaming all the time. That's not how things work. I mean, it takes time. It takes seasons of lying to ourselves for a long time, sometimes years. I hate to admit how there's times in my life where I've just been in self-delusion for a long time. And then there's these moments though, where the truth can emerge. And that's the power of Jupiter in Cancer, to trigger those kinds of things for us, where we finally see, oh, this is true. And then what collapses is all of the identities and selves that we had before that realization existed. And then what continues are the actions based on that new realization. That's the beauty of truth. It's not only destructive, but it's also affirming and initiative, and allows us to build who we are anew based on its power. And so, this is the potency of Jupiter, a great planet. This is Jupiter, a planet that's very large. These are big truths. These are big epiphanies. These are big realizations that Jupiter can bring. And when truth is that big and we're digesting it, and we're dieting on heavy doses of deep truth, of course it's going to be destabilizing at some level and destructive. And we've had that already all summer, Saturn overcoming that by square from Aries. And now see that free flow of the water element. I do think that some of these epiphanies we've earned this summer and we've kind of endured a realization of, will have room here to lead the way and to take over and to flow into these two eclipses, the lunar and the solar. So we can maybe have a sense of home. I mean, if there's an eclipse acceleration and an eclipse new emergence, what better thing could it be than to, here's my accelerated new home. I'm going to be pushed into the new sense of, this is the truth of my life, and then the wisdom from acknowledging that I can now hopefully contain as I make decisions. That's part of the home, the long and winding road that leads me back to your door, that we have this epiphany that can propel. And this is all of this year and in the next. And then I want to come back to the idea of the long and winding road. Eclipses are like that. They tell us, hey, you're wrong. Nope, that doesn't work. I mean, that's literally what it is. The light is blocked. So light is a thing that allows us to see and therefore function properly when we have light. So we have luminaries in astrology, and they're so important. They represent the body, the moon, and the mind of the sun. So they're very important to have light flowing in a way that isn't corruptible or corrupted. We can see where we're going, right? When the light gets turned off, it's not good at one level, because we have no idea where we're going or what we're doing. And that's where I think the circuitous model of eclipses themselves can be applied to this moment as well. And listen, I don't want to tell you that this has to be any kind of major upheaval weekend, or that your weekend has to go astray or anything like that. It doesn't. I just want to acknowledge the layer of astrological symbolism, which is simply that there is a blocking of light during eclipses, and then try to hold space for that in case some of you may be feeling that, and it's not that everybody has to feel that, and it's not even that the blocking of light is bad. We get to block some light because it's time for that light to be turned out for good. And then we can turn on other lights. And that might be some of what is happening here as well. So, okay, let me reground. This is this eclipse chart. This is what I would encourage you to be focusing on. Jupiter and Cancer, the house topics that those comprise in your chart. The epiphanies you've had in those areas. The epiphanies you've had in the Pisces sector. since Jupiter entered Cancer. The epiphanies in your Sagittarius sector, those are also Jupiter ruled. And try to lean on those right now if you need to. If things aren't feeling as clear because they're eclipses or because it's, Saturn and Pisces, you can lean on truth, wisdom, justice, revelation. I think I said it already, but truth is really a guiding light. In a certain sense, the definition of truth is that it is what is real. It is what is therefore tangible. It is what is therefore guiding us. What truths actually are indestructible? Truth is indestructible by definition. Truth is true. The task with the Virgoan in this season and Mercury in Virgo is that because something's true doesn't mean we blast it to everyone around us. Truth can sometimes be personal and internal. That's some of the Pisces energy, Jupiter ruling Pisces. Truth can sometimes be private, just with our families. There's a lot of things that are for a home or for a family or for a couple or for a family and their children that are just their private truths and worlds. It doesn't have to be broadcast to everybody. It's not anybody else's right? It's your private, sacred, personal experience of your localized unit, whoever that is in your world. I'm trying to delineate a little bit more deeply the notion of truth or other things we can attach to it as a way to delineate this eclipse moment. But wisdom can sometimes require a withholding. Just because something's true doesn't mean you have to inject it into someone who may not want to hear it or who it might be harmful to convey truth to in a particular way. People have their own journeys with truth. And I think that's some of what we're going to have to maybe figure out here, especially with Mercury and Virgo for this first eclipse, is like the discernment around when to say what's true and how to express what's true. And you see, this is the Virgo-Pisces opposition. You have this Piscean revelation of, wow, these deep emotional epiphanies around wisdom. And then opposite that is the material Virgo and the scrutinizing Mercury, trying to discern the inarticulable Piscean and bring it into words that can be useful for our material build-outs day to day. Maybe this is something you can think about after the eclipses are over. Let these eclipses hit. You'll still have Mercury in Libra the rest of September. Mars will enter Scorpio the day after the second eclipse, and that's very active energy with Mars. At least there's a little bit more of an ability just symbolically to enact some of the changes that these eclipses have brought us. So maybe you wait for then, or you maybe wait for later in the year when you're ready to talk about stuff. There's no rush. That's the other thing I would say about the water element. There's simply no rush. We can experience the internal world and let that be a home for us, Cancer, Pisces, as much as we need it to be until we're ready to get out and maybe share or bring it into another form. But I think private epiphany and discerning engagement with what is true for you are big, big themes here in this moment. Okay. One final thing I wanted to say, I had a long thing in the last video, but I didn't include it because it just was too long, and I'm going to do this very short. But when you type in, since 1990, what are the biggest genocides? And this is heavy, so trigger warning. If you don't want to hear about genocide, just go to the end of this video. Well, I'm saving this for the end, but I did, and I typed it into ChatGPT. I said, tell me the biggest genocide since 1990. The first two that come up on the list, and I don't think that they meant biggest by numbers. It was just more like most talked about or the ones that have been more important kind of culturally with their impact. And I think it's probably biased because these are more Western cultural implications. But the two are Bosnia in 1995 that it mentions, 8,000 killed in Bosnia over a few days in this region. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. Srebrenica, I think is how you say it. And that's 95. And then the second one that comes up is the Rwandan genocide, 94. Well, what are those two things, 94 and 95? Saturn and Pisces. Saturn and Pisces. And so it's so powerful actually from a mundane perspective to realize since March 2023 until where we are now with Saturn and Pisces, genocide has been front and center in the collective conversation. And of course we have the situation in Palestine, and I'm not going to try to get into the nuances of the definition. My sense is that there's just a kind of a loose sense of genocide. A lot of people think that's happening there. A lot of groups agree that that's happening there, including Bet Salam, the Israeli human rights organization. Israelis agree that there's a genocide in Palestine. There's all kinds of definitions. I think some core meaning, some kind of de facto. There's de jure, which is legal, and that's what lawyers want to debate. There's de facto, which is facts on the ground. And it's pretty clear, I think, to most people, it's de facto genocide that we've been dealing with Saturn and Pisces. In September, what's going to happen? There's already a human rights groups, more coming out. out. There was one today that said they consider it a genocide finally. Just more people all summer. But in September, France and the UK are going to recognize Palestine at the UN. Big deal. And so that may be coming to a head here. And it's less the mundane unfoldment and more the internal grief of realizing that we live in a world that committed a genocide and front and center on all of our screens for Saturn and Pisces. And my words don't even do that justice, the implications, but it's a truth bomb. It's having to swallow a truth pill or a red pill or whatever, however you want to say it, that's the world you and I live in. Genocide was done in the name of Western governments and supported by Western governments. And so, this is going to reverberate for decades, probably centuries, the significance of these events of Saturn and Pisces. And I think it's just an example of the heaviness in terms of the emotional weight of it all and the complexities of truth and how maybe that can lead us home somewhere. And we hope it does, right? We hope that we're led to a more just world based on legal principles that nations can agree on. We had the Geneva Conventions. Those were thrown out, sadly. But maybe we need new Geneva Conventions, new Nuremberg trials to figure out and set right and basically find a home as a human collective here going forward. Uranus in Gemini, of course, was the last time you had reworking of the world order where the Geneva Conventions come after that in Nuremberg and everything. Well, we may get another one here. Uranus in Gemini, then Uranus into Cancer. And we may need to rewrite and restructure some of these global rule sets so genocide doesn't happen. And let's pray that will unfold here. So, okay, that's my lunar eclipse in Pisces video. Everybody, find your way home. Try to rely on the epiphanies and the truths that you're feeling and experiencing, and then the natural corollaries of initiation that those bring you into. It's one of those things where it's like, wow, you finally see after years of self-delusion, oh no, I've been deluded. Oh no, that's the truth. Oh, the next steps are kind of built into the realization and the epiphany. They're naturally, immediately there. And often it's kind of easy to start acting differently when you have the deep and profound epiphany about what is true for you in a given context or dynamic. So look for that during this eclipse. I think that's going to happen to a lot of us, like breakthroughs, unexpected accelerations around these epiphanies of beingness that then foster and support initiations around care and nurturance. Jupiter in Cancer, ruling the eclipse by domiciles, trining it very closely. So, okay, take care everyone out there. Have a great eclipse, this first eclipse. You can find more of me here, like and subscribe. You'll get these notifications. I think you have to click that bell if you want to do that. I'm on Patreon, the link is in the description. A lot of videos over there. I just publish every few days, new updates, kind of like this, but in smaller bites. And then I have a live stream that I do there once a month. This month, we're going to talk about exaltation rulership and triplicity rulership, which is, you can see how I'm always applying this stuff in my videos, but we're going to break down some of the textual origins of that and talk about it a little bit more. And then I do a weekly video over there where I just talk about the astrology of the week ahead, looking for the best moons. So all of that you can find, link in the description. Join us over there and have a beautiful eclipse. I'll talk to you later. Peace. Bye-bye.